I'm Billy Mills. You're on native ground.
Brothers, what we do in life echoes in eternity.
I'm on native ground. I'm on native ground. Sundance Film Festival 2011. And we're having a really great time seeing some good films. And it's snowing.
And I'm at the campus of Cal State University attending the Native American Film Festival. I have as a guest with us
Jed Riffe.
Jed, can you tell us about your role as a filmmaker?
I've been making films, documentaries primarily about Native American subjects for about 40 years now. I made a first film in 1977 called Rosebud to Dallas that looked at the Relocation Act and how Indians were taken from reservations and removed and put into urban areas to get education, supposedly. And I was shocked to find out that, there's 400 barbers on the Rosebud Reservation, there's 375 auto mechanics, yet there's only one garage on the whole reservation. There's 400 welders, and there's only one welding place, and that's in that one garage, and there's no barber shop. So that really shocked me as an Anglo, and I'm going, well, why are we paying? What is the government paying for if we're not really helping people? And so looking from that moment to today, I've looked at Indian-white relations and Indian-white history as a way of telling our stories and of communicating bigger ideas about American society.
So, and since that film, what type of films have you focused on since? More documentaries or more movies?
Mostly documentaries. Ishi the Last Yahi, I came to California to make that film. It's the true story of a man known as the last wild Indian in North America. It's really a true story of the best documented case of genocide in North America. And at the same time, while we were filming Ishi the Last Yahi, 3 white men were arrested for looting a Yahi burial site up in East Yahi country. And they went to their house and they found more grave goods than they had places to store them. And I got to thinking, why does this fascination with the Indians of the past and of getting remnants of their culture and not looking at the living people today? And so I did a film called Who Owns the Past with a question mark that looked at really the true story of American Indians' struggle for the control of their ancestral remains.
That's very interesting. And any more recent films that you've been involved in?
Yeah, I just made a film with Jack Kohler and Maureen Gosling called California's Lost Tribes. And it's the first documentary on Indian gaming. And the lost, quote unquote, comes from the story of 64 tribes that were terminated here in California, half of which have now been restored. But that's one of the reasons we can have 108 tribes with gambling rights here.
How recent is that film?
It came out in 2006, and it's been shown all around the world.
And that's a really timely topic. How was that received?
Well, there's a lot of tension, and particularly even back then more than there is today. And there was it brought out a lot of racism against Indians. And people also, it kind of challenged their romantic notions of Indian people. Why should they be involved with gambling? Well, if you know anything, Ishi, the man I made the film about, he left us 400 gambling songs. Out of his 500 songs he recorded, 400 of them were gambling songs. So, what do you do in the middle of winter when you're sitting in a little bitty house or under a rock shelter or you gamble, you tell stories, and that's just what people did. And so, I think that, today, I think it's very interesting and ironic that gambling is the only way, it's the only thing that's worked. Nothing worked on reservations. Every single thing has been a failure that the government has tried to bring economic benefits to Indian people. The first time it's worked is gambling.
That's very interesting. Now, your perspective as a filmmaker and being non-native, do you have any comments on how your films are received or your focus to choosing that particular topic?
Well, people have asked me, well, why are you an Anglo making films on American Indian subjects? And the reason I do that is to educate my people. I think American Indians know their history, but white Americans don't. And they don't really know their history because it isn't very pretty. $5 a head, 50 cents a scalp. That's our history.
Mm-hmm. It's a sad history. That is. Well, any more recent projects other than the what we talked about earlier?
Well, I did some filming. I helped a group of Indians in Northern California get Ishi's brain repatriated. We've been looking at trying to tell more about Ishi's story because it's very revealing. And in fact, his brain was taken out during an autopsy after he died of tuberculosis. This would have been the last thing he wanted. And when Indian people saw my film and saw that that was at the end and that happened, they started to demand that they wanted to find Ishi's brain, they wanted to get it united with his cremated remains, and they wanted him buried again in his own home. homeland. And so we have a small little project with that, and we're talking with other people about other issues around anthropologists like Alfred Kroeber, and we're looking at how we can continue to educate people about history in a way that helps them understand the present.
There's so many stories, and I recall receiving information on that. I didn't realize you were involved in that, but that is a powerful thing. It's not just telling stories for entertainment, it's telling stories for documentation and for educating, so I really appreciate that kind of effort. In terms of your how you got involved in filmmaking, any comments for young people out there in terms of breaking into the film industry?
Well, I was trained as a journalist, but it wasn't until I came to California in 1970 and saw the first half-inch reel-to-reel video. That's what it was, reel-to-reel. You actually threaded it. And when I saw that, I realized we could make and tell our own stories and make films, and that whether they got on television or not, we could use them to educate and organize. And so that's what I've been doing ever since. And I think that now the technology, that black and white camera cost $10,000 then. Now you can buy a great camera for $3,000 as color, and it'll do 10 times what that camera will do. And people have the tools, and they're now affordable for anybody to buy a camera and to get an editing system and to make their own story. Everybody's a filmmaker.
You mentioned some of your titles. Is there a way for our audience to access a website to take a look at some of the work you've done or to obtain some of the films?
Yes, jedriffefilms.com, and that's Jedri, F as in Frank, F as in Frank, E, films.com.
And what would they find on that website besides just your information?
Well, they'd find information about all those films and about where they played. There'd be discussions about them. Like Ishi just played in Paris last January on the 4th and was sold to a sold-out audience. Now, that's the film I made 20 years ago, but look, it's still selling out in France.
That's exciting news.
Yes.
Quite exciting. And Jed, can you tell us about some of your favorite moments in film? Your personal moments in terms of films you've done?
Well, just walking the Moke Trail where Ishi lived and being in his land, in the Yahi's land. Their homeland today has less people living there than have lived there for the last 10,000 years. They could still be there. And when you walk that land and you walk in and you find these village sites and you see that there was a whole race of people living here for thousands of years and they're gone. And you know, everything else is there. And it really makes you think.
Yeah, that's a powerful image. I'd love to see that film once again. I didn't realize it's over 20 years old. So, yeah. Any other comments in terms of the Lost Tribes of California? Is that the name of that title?
California's Lost Tribes.
California's Lost Tribes.
Well, I just don't think people understand how much Indian gaming has benefited the non-Indian neighbors. I mean, you only hear about the negative stuff and people complaining and all this stuff. But when you see fire trucks being built, you see whole fire departments being built. You see money being put into police departments. You see money being put into protecting the land, bringing back the land that we whites have destroyed, and Indians becoming stewards of their own lands again. That's really important.
I don't believe that people realize how little economic development there was prior to the Gaming Act. And that's very, very important. And it's a very first generation that we're going to see with those types of benefits. And so, Jed, what's your most recent project that you've been working on?
Well, I've been helping a young filmmaker, two filmmakers, one from Alaska and one from Berkeley, San Francisco, make a film called Smokin' Fish. It's a story of a young Tlingit who is reconnecting with his past by rebuilding his grandmother's smokehouse. And then that's a place where the family had, when his grandmother died, the family kind of fell apart, and the smokehouse kind of fell apart. But it was the center of the community. And him rebuilding that has brought back the people, and they're training their kids about how to be fishermen, how to smoke fish, how to take care of themselves. So if this whole world fell apart tomorrow, they could go back to living like they've been living for thousands of years.
That sounds quite exciting. When do you expect that our audience will be able to access that or see that in film theaters?
We'll see it in the fall on public television, the fall of 2011.
Oh, that's fantastic. 2011, yeah. Quite soon. Thank you. Well, I'm Anecita Augustinus with On Native Ground, and I would like to thank our guest today, Mr. Jed Riffe from Jed Riffe Films.
I'm Jed Riffe, and you're on Native Ground.